Hello?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. I have two questions, and the first one is, it seems like a lot of times when you talk to atheists, they start from the premise that personal experience has been established to be unreliable. And but we rely on personal experience all the time. Like in courtrooms, you know, the value of eyewitness testimony, that's the fundamental evidence. You know, the jury can take it and believe it or not believe it, but the value of personal testimony, not hearsay, what someone else has told you has been their experience, but what you experienced yourself, the value of putting it forward is still considered primary, and it's a foundational principle of the U.S. And we also rely on personal experience all the time. Like if you're going to do something like climb the Himalayas and you've never done it, you read about people who have done that before, and they say, you know, at whatever altitude I experienced this. You don't know, but you believe them. You take precautions, or you prepare based on what they experience. And so it seems like the value of personal experience has not been proven to be unreliable. And then the second question is that it seems like something can be understood or it can't. It's understandable or it's not. And like Catholics start from the premise that the nature of reality can't be understood. It's not understandable. And atheists seem to start from the premise that you know, reality is a process that could be understood. But if it could, why don't we understand any more than we did like 2,000 years ago? We have theory, you know, the theory of the Big Bang, but when you look at what complexity theorists say, they say that there's still a lot of leaps that have to be made in thinking to make the concept work. You know, like it's not established. We still don't fully understand it. And so if the nature of reality is understandable, why don't we understand more about it today than we did, say, 2,000 years ago?
Well, let's take that one at a time. I probably should have interrupted you before going on to the second one.
Those are two big questions, yeah.
Personal experience. Is it reliable?
Well, you have to realize it's not binary. It's not like all personal experience is reliable or no personal experience is reliable. It's not like you're choosing to, you know, deny all experience or accept all experience. That's not how it works. Personal experience has a certain probability of being reliable, and what you're looking at is when the particular claim the person is making is going to have an intrinsic prior probability. So if they're saying aliens abducted them, or they're saying they saw a horde of demons attack them in their room or something like that, we know from past experience that usually turns out to be hallucinatory or not true. And so for a personal experience to overcome that, we need a lot more evidence than that. We need superbly good personal experience, or we need a lot of it from a lot of different sources, a lot of different witnesses, or we need physical evidence.
And you're talking about like standards of evidence that professional historians would take into account.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. This is what I do in the book. It's Bayesian reasoning, where you have to weigh the different possibilities. So certain kinds of testimonies are unreliable, or obviously unreliable, because they make improbable claims. And so for those claims to be upheld, you need more than just someone claiming it. That's why
I mean, like, what about, you know, people who wrote Gospels who said, you know, they wrote it after they say Jesus died, and they say, you know, they witnessed it.
But they don't.
They were closer in time.
Yeah, none of the Gospels were written by anyone who says they foresaw any of the stuff they wrote down. In fact, they don't even tell us who they are or how they know anything that they haven't. They don't tell us their sources. They don't tell us their methods, which is very weird.
Written, I mean, 50 years in the big scheme of things is not that much time. And so,
actually, it is.
You know, if it was,
I made this point.
I just want to say I'm so excited to get this call with Richard.
I made this point.
It's a lot less than
I made this point in my speech yesterday.
1,550 years.
Well, let's talk about Roswell, New Mexico. In 1947, this Air Force officer found some sticks and tinfoil in the desert, and he claimed it was debris from a flying saucer. Within just 30 to 40 years, and this is in the 20th century with universal literacy, newspapers, photographs, the whole deal, within just 30 to 40 years, an entire legend had built up about the government discovering an entire intact flying saucer that they recovered alien bodies from and performed autopsies on. That's just 30 to 40 years. So it's the exact same timeline that we're looking at with the Gospels. Legends can spring up really fast.
But it's starting from not an eyewitness account. It's starting
Well,
from
yeah, it
someone
is actually.
No, he's saying he found something. Well, from what you said, he's saying he found something.
Yeah, it was published in the newspaper.
The ship crash.
Yeah, it was in the newspaper with photographs of the debris that he found from 1947.
But you didn't say he said he saw the ship bound.
No, that was what people were telling just 30 to 40 years later. And so when we look at the Gospels, we don't know where these people are getting their stories. They're not eyewitnesses themselves. They don't claim to know any eyewitnesses. They don't even tell us what their sources are.
Why are they written as a description? I mean, it's written as an eyewitness description.
It actually isn't.
It's like Jesus.
No.
It's like, Jesus was on the cross, then he asked for a drink
of
water.
No. Oh, you know what? I highly recommend then you can do some more research on this. For example, the crucifixion account is almost entirely based on clips from the Psalms. They just took passages. If I had time, I could dig out an example from my book.
But the language.
No, actually,
like
the language is.
I've read it.
Yeah, but the language is biblical. We can look at eyewitness accounts. We have, for example, Lucian of Samosata wrote an account of him encountering a new religion in what's now Turkey. And it's called Alexander the Quack Prophet. You could probably find examples of it online, but that's what an eyewitness account looks like. The Gospels aren't written like that at all. If you look at Caesar's Civil War, he writes it in third person, but it's still an eyewitness account. And again, it's written very differently than what we see in the Gospels. The Gospels look a lot like mythology. We have a lot of examples of other religions that were coming up with documents that are written in the same kind of voice. And there were, in fact, about 40 different Gospels, and we know about 10 to 12 of them that we have mostly intact or largely intact. And we know a lot of those have to be false, and yet they read a lot like the Gospels we have in the New Testament. So it was actually very common to fabricate narratives in the form that we see in the Gospels in the New Testament.
But I know from personally reading the Gospels that it sounds like a first-person account.
Oh, well, see, I think what you need to do is you have to understand these books were written 2,000 years ago in a different language and a different culture. So if you want to understand
that... So it was closer in time. It was written closer in time.
No, but my point is you have to look at what literature was like back then. So you can't judge it based on the standards of what you're used to reading today, because what people write today is very different. The styles they write, the way they choose words, the way they construct stories is entirely different today than it was 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, and to circle back to your original question about how reliable personal experience is, I mean, you're telling us that you have this personal experience of having read the Gospels and just knowing by reading it, like knowing and inherently understanding what's going on in there, even though there is this whole system of historians having read it and compared notes and comparing it to things that they already know.
Tell me whether something is written as a first-person account or not. I can judge that for myself.
Well,
I can read it and I could be like, this sounds like a third person.
I'll give you an example.
Like an omniscient point of view. This sounds like a first person. Like, I can make that judgment myself.
But they aren't, actually. They aren't even written in first person by a standard literary theory. So here's the Gospel of Mark, chapter 15, verse 24. It reads literally, "They part his garments among them, casting lots upon them." Now here's Psalm 22, verse 18. "They part my garments among them and cast lots upon them." It's almost identical word for word.
A lot of the Psalms are supposed to be like prophecy.
Yeah,
but so if it were true,
Mark is writing in the third person. The Psalms are writing in the first person. The Psalms were written hundreds of years before.
Prophecy and then it was experienced.
No, but see, that's the thing. You could say that, but they're using the exact word for word, exact same statement, and it doesn't even say it's a fulfilled prophecy.
To get back to the point.